Let's try again. Good morning to everyone. I'm delighted to be here and have a chance to kick off the summit by, in effect, almost giving you an executive summary of what you're going to see and hear over the next 3 days, together with a glimpse of what we may encounter in terms of some incredible opportunities and challenges in the coming year. As I do that, the backdrop of my comments is the work of the National Commission. The commission that began its work when Dan said, be bold. Remember, Dan, you said, be bold. And when the report was first written, I said, man, that's bold, but maybe it's too bold. I now say, 12 months later, not bold enough. Because what we thought would be the big issues have become even bigger issues. And the first one was that we said, coming out of the pandemic, America is beginning to understand that we really are more than an academic institution. Yes, we are about academics, first and foremost. But we knew that we were feeding children. I wonder how many millions of lunches and breakfasts we delivered around this country during the pandemic. The public began to say, yeah, they feed kids. By show of hands, how many of you noticed any increase in mental health issues with our kids in the last 18 months? Hands way up. We're about the whole learner. But we also said early on, something that I deeply embraced for personal reasons, is that no child in this nation shall be marginalized. That we must love and nurture and support all children. I've traveled a lot internationally. I've had the privilege to speak in 27 other nations in my career. And every time I return to America, I thank God I live in America. And one of the reasons is our public education system. My wife Bonnie and I, we have 5 children. And we have 13 grandchildren. 2 of my 5 children are disabled. One mildly disabled after being in a horrific accident at the age of 11, spending 9 months in a coma. Several of those months on life support systems with a traumatic brain injury. And a daughter who is very severely disabled with something called Lennox-Gastaut syndrome. In 1975, Ted Kennedy led a charge for people, Dan, more our age, we remember 94, 142. We've come a long ways in this country, ladies and gentlemen, in special education. 7 of the 13 grandchildren have IEPs. No other nation would be doing that for my family. 2 of the 5 kids are young ladies. We've come a long ways in sex equity. Ladies, we have further to go, but we've come a long ways since my career began. Juneteenth, an example we're beginning to make progress in addressing the needs of all of our children, of our entire nation. 2 of my grandchildren are African American. 2 of my grandchildren are Mexican American. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to nurture and support every child, irregardless of disability, or sex, or race, or social economic status. We need to embrace every child to become all they're capable of being. And in a politically divided nation, sometimes that has become difficult, unfortunately. But what I worry a whole lot about is those first 2 items you see under culture have become front and center in American education last year. And we took our eye off of the third cultural belief of the commission. And that is we need to be future-driven. See, my fear is that we are so ingrained with the belief we got to get back to normal, that what we're trying to do is stabilize an American education system that shouldn't be stabilized, that needs to be changed. And if you really look at the future, and what I'm going to show you as some cutting-edge technology today, is that we're going to have to change our instructional programs. We got to get serious about changing what Dan just talked about, that our classrooms still look more like 100 years ago than unlike 100 years ago, and we can do that. We can personalize our educational program for all kids. But to do that, we're going to have to use technology and other learning accelerators different than we have in the past. We're going to have to use community resources differently than we have in the past. Ben Houston, who's in the audience, will give a presentation about the incredible need of addressing the early childhood needs in this country. And we've got to make sure that our education systems becomes more representative as professionals of our actual nation. They were the key components of the commission recommendations. In your program, don't go to it now, but on pages 13 through 38 are all the description of all the sessions. What you will see is a legend next to every one of the presentations to tell you which part of this wheel that presentation best represents. Because, ladies and gentlemen, you can't do it all. If you try to do everything, well, you complete the statement. If everything is a priority, what, folks? Nothing is a priority. And what we need to recognize is while we embrace all those items, here is the reality. We stand here today with a teaching profession and administrators who are physically and mentally exhausted over the last year. And you cannot change schools faster than the rate of readiness and trust. And I profess to you that there was a greater readiness for change a year ago in most districts than there is today because of that physical and emotional exhaustion. And there was greater trust. Politically, and Dan, you deal with this in Washington every day, we have become so politically polarized, and education and school boards have become the epicenter of that debate. And that is a tough time in many ways to change our schools. And so you got to be in a balancing act. And so the commission began looking at the right-hand side. We're going to be future-focused. The reality of it is, when we look at the services the 120 districts asked for this year, they had more to do with the left-hand side of this than the right-hand side. We've got to stabilize the districts. And there are leadership strategies and instructional strategies that can help you do that. And if that's where your district still is, we can help you with that through Learning 2025, pulling from the incredible resources of the National Dropout Prevention Center. And once you get that, again, you got to step back and say, but what am I trying to stabilize? Am I trying to get back to the classroom Dan just described of 100 years ago? Or are we going to use it as an opportunity to change? And it's a very difficult time to change now for another reason. If you take, how many in the room have been in the profession for less than 20 years? Hands way up. Just put your hands way up. Keep your hands way up. Okay, keep them up. Commissioners, AASA presidents, Dan Moore, keep your hands up. Look around the room. This is an old group. And why is that significant? If you have been in American education for less than 20 years, which are the people that many of us serve as administrators for, they have lived with a scripted curriculum ever since the National Standards Movement. And a scripted curriculum isn't into innovation, isn't into change. And so we're asking a group of people to fundamentally change what we have told them to do for the last 2 decades. But once you get there, then what are the leadership strategies? What are the instructional strategies you need to actually be future-focused? You're going to hear those throughout the conference. And when you begin to look at them, what you're going to understand is we have clearly an instructional design problem in this country. We are regulated, certified, tenured, contracted, and we test the kids in silos called disciplines. How many of you in this room, honestly, would like to take an 11th or 12th grade math or science test right now? We got the national press in the room. We could get your name, released back to your local community, how well you did. But you did it once. How do I know you did it? Because you wouldn't be here. Why could you do it back then, but you can't today? Let's complete the statement. If you don't use it, and the real world, especially in 2022, doesn't function in disciplines. We're trying to stabilize a system that is outdated. And so what are the instructional designs look like that do that? You're going to see some of them here. And if you really look at the instructional designs, you'll see that we're not only in silos, but because of that scripted curriculum and that whole culture it created, we drove out of our profession many of the most innovative people because they couldn't take it. And so what do? We've got to do both of these things at the same time. And that's what you're going to see throughout this summit. How do you do both of these at the same time? It's not easy. But as Dan and Mort said, we're here to provide the guardrails, the lighthouse for the rest of the country. As we do that, it can't be a series of independent little events. It's got to be a systematic process, deeply thought through. It's got to be driven by successful practices to kind of inform where we're trying to go. One of the reasons we think the summit is important is all the models districts are going to be presenting here. They're going to give you snapshots of what it looks like. We have to be able to see it to understand it, and then use those as examples of what we try to build in our own districts back home. We think it's really important, and we are very thankful you have done this. Almost everybody here came as a team, from boardroom to classroom. We have teams. You need to spend time while you're here talking with each other, thinking about how do we implement this back home, and what do we do and what don't we do. For that reason, we're going to leave this ballroom open throughout the whole conference for you to come back in around the round tables with your teams and have discussions, except for during the general sessions. We have ordered food trucks for lunch. They'll be available. The hotel restaurants are available too, but there are going to be food trucks right outside of where you registered for the conference yesterday or today off the terrace level. We encourage you to go to those trucks, grab some food, come back in here. We set an hour and a half aside for lunch so you can talk with each other, begin to think through what kind of system do we need to put in place? What are the practices we need to go after? And for some of the small districts, that might be one or two things. For the bigger districts, it might be 5 or 6 different things. But as you do that, let me set the stage now for the future, what we'll see during the coming year. As I said, we got to be future-driven. If we're going to be future-driven, we've got to look at what technology is about to do to the workplace, home, and society, and how it can fundamentally change our schools. To do that, I want to play a video just to kind of remind us where today's young people are. They're very adept at the technology. Forgive me, more adept than many of us are. So let's watch this young man play with the technology.
No, Word World.
Okay, show me Word World.
Okay. Where you go?
Oh,
Okay. Right there.
good job.
Yeah, what the guy? What the monster?
Sure, you can do the Word World Monster episode.
Okay.
Go to your favorite part. You looking for the monkey part? There it is. There's the monkey part.
The monkey.
Yeah. Yeah.
These kids are dealing with this technology every day of their life. They're going to be bored to death in our traditional classrooms, and they already are, but with each generation, more and more so. And so what we got to recognize is that these kids are different. Can I use your iPhone for a minute? How many in the room have a device that looks something like this? Okay? Okay, let me ask another question. How many of you in the room have a son or a daughter or a grandchild who is a preteen, a teen, or in their early 20s? Hands way up. Okay, for everybody who's got their hands up, how many of you hope the person you just raised your hands about sometime in the next decade becomes independent? Is there anybody that doesn't want that? Because if you don't, you got a mental health problem already, folks. Whose was this? Oh, okay. Let me ask you another question. Take it again. Do you let the kids use these when you take the state test? And before I go any further, I'm not opposed to state testing. Dan, you remember, we're in the state testing program. Largest one in the country for 7 years. I'm not opposed to testing. But they only can do certain things. We don't let the kids use these when they take the state test. And we're going to see how good you can do as a whole audience together. I'm going to ask you a question, and you got to yell out your answer. But you only can have a one-word answer. Okay? Only one word. And don't yell the answer out until I say the word now. Okay? We don't let kids use these when they take the state test because they might blank. Yell out the word now. Cheat. Wow, we all saw it the same way. How might they cheat? How might they cheat?
What's that?
How might they cheat?
Looking up answers.
Looking up answer, yeah. Anybody got another way they might cheat? What is it?
Ask a friend.
Yeah. These darn kids might either use resources or work with others. What are the two most basic skills you need? I'm going to show you with some hard research in a few minutes. But what are the two most basic skills you need to become independent as an adult in 2022? Use resources, work with others. What do we call it in American education? Cheating. I want to ask you a real tough question. I really want you to be challenged by it. Are we trying to force 21st century technology to conform to our 20th century schools? Or are we trying to use 21st century technology to transform our 20th century schools? See, today's kids, they're an extension of this technology. They have never lived without it. But it's done more than simply change how they play with technology. How many in the audience got a driver's license within 6 months of turning legal age to get a driver's license? Hands way up. Okay? Let me show you the first part of this. Some of you have seen in the past, the next slide, but it's updated as of last month now. This is what happened with driver licenses for 12th graders in America up until 2019. Updated as of May of 2022. It's a change in behavior. Now, this next thing I know none of you did, but you may have had friends that did. How many of you had a friend that before they graduated from high school went out and drank adult alcoholic beverages with another friend? Okay? Not you, others. Look at this. That was 2019, updated as of last month. How many of you had at least one part-time job before you graduated from high school? Updated. How many of you had at least one date before you graduated from high school? Now, they have not updated the date data for 2022, although all indications are it has fallen dramatically too. Folks, these are fundamental changes. These are fundamental and irreversible changes in behavior. And when we talk about things like SEL, I want to suggest to you, we learned a lot of our SEL skills by trial and error through these types of experiences. They're simply not getting. Our kids are different. But a bigger issue is the workplace, the home, the society they're about to enter is fundamentally and irreversibly changed too. Even more than the planes you talked about versus the rocket ship. Many of you have heard me speak before. I would love to have 3 hours and go in depth on all kinds of technology. I've picked only one example for today. But I'm going to ask you to really carefully think through this example. And don't think about, wow, what's that going to do to me? Think about its impact on education. And what our kids need to learn and how they're going to learn and live and interact. And it's called GPT. And it's GPT-3. Now, afterwards, I want you to Google it tonight, sometime, not during this session, but sometime I want you to Google it, and you're going to get a lot more examples than I'm going to give you. This thing is taken off like crazy. But it began with something called GPT-1 that we all interacted with and didn't even realize it. If I go to send Mort Sherman an email, and I put MS, which are the first 2 letters of his email, what happens, folks? My contact list pops up. Okay? If Bart over here puts the same 2 letters in, is he going to get the same list? No. How come? It's predictive analytics. It's based upon those people in my contact list. No big deal. Not a big deal. That was GPT-1. It would help you find information. But it wasn't just the contact list. More common example many of you use, Siri. Siri goes finds information for you quickly. Isn't it amazing how quickly it finds information for you? That was GPT-1. Been around for a little while. Then we went from GPT-1 to GPT-2. And GPT-2 was 10 times more powerful than GPT-1. Just keep that ratio in mind. And what would it do? It moved from finding information to more monitoring and keeping you informed and predicting. And remember, the kids are going to use this technology and are using it. Best example, I go send Mort that email. I put in subject, first 2 or 3 words, what happens? Anybody tell me? It predicts the next 2 or 3 words, doesn't it? Do you know that it would not predict the same 2 or 3 words for me as it would for Mary Ellen Elia over here? You know why? It's based upon the words she has used versus the words I have used. Now, Mort and I email each other a lot. Mort's a former English teacher. I have dyslexia. He does not like reading my emails. But the next 2 or 3 words be based upon the words I use, even how I spell them. It's predictive analytics, not a big deal. A deeper one I want to talk about is GPS. How many in the room have ever used GPS, Global Positioning Systems? Okay, you're driving. While you're driving, have you ever had it suggest a reroute? Okay, now how's it do it? It knows where you're going. It monitors the cars in front of you who are on one of those roads, and it suggests it changes. I travel a ton. I fly, get a rent-a-car, I drive to one of your districts. I use GPS. What would I have used before GPS to get to your district? A map. Now, I want you to keep something in mind. And I'm using as a frame of reference to where I'm going to take you. What has spell check done to your ability to spell? And today's kids' ability to spell. Am I right? Keep that in mind. It's brain development. Because GPS impacts spatial memory and spatial navigation and mental mapping. 8 years ago, I had the privilege of co-authoring one of my books with Paul Nussbaum. Dr. Nussbaum is one of the nation's leading neural researchers. And we talked a whole lot about, at that point, the impact technology was having on brain development in that book. I went back to Paul over the last couple months to say, Paul, what's the research now showing? And forgive me, we as educators are paying no attention. Because in the middle of your brain, you have something called the hippocampus. The hippocampus deals with spatial memory, spatial navigation, and mental mapping. Anybody want to guess what all the MRIs are showing? A shrinking hippocampus in us. And increasingly a lack of adequate development in the hippocampus of young people. Don't need it. Why is that so important? Because the hippocampus is the foundation of the prefrontal cortex. And the prefrontal cortex is responsible for problem solving, organizational skills, and the ability to focus. How many of you have noticed a decline in our kids' ability to focus and organizational skills? And that was with GPT-2. It scares me to death the more I've studied this over the last 2 months to see what GPT-3 could possibly be doing, and we're paying no attention to it. Because GPT-3 first saw the light of day in December 2022. It's only been around 6 months. 2 industries made a ton of money during the pandemic: pharmaceuticals and tech companies. And ladies and gentlemen, those tech companies have made a decision that there's an untapped market for them. And you know what it is? Education. And the deeper discussions we're having more and more, Stuart Udell, who many of you know, and others kind of led the discussions for us in this area. Ladies and gentlemen, the tech companies are coming after us because they say they can personalize instruction in ways that the public standardized system will not accommodate. Ladies and gentlemen, we got to figure out how to do that. Why? Because GPT-3 is over 100 times more powerful than GPT-2 is. And while it was only created 6 months ago, there are apps already out there right now over the last several weeks, and I'm going to show them to you. And we've got to figure out how to deal with them, because what GPT-3 does is not simply find information for the kids in our schools or monitor and keep them informed. It will create information for them. So let me give you an example. GPT-2, remember? Start to write the email to more, it gives me the next 2 or 3 words. Anybody in the room want to guess what GPT-3 does? It writes the entire email. Using the phraseology I would use, even all my misspelled words. Mort's will all be perfect English. Mine will not be. It's predictive analytics. Give a kid a writing assignment. Google it. The teacher can't tell whether the GPT-3 system wrote it or the kid wrote it. It'll also give you the bibliography. It'll create it for you instantly, as fast as Siri now gets information for you. See, GPT-2 dealt with keywords. GPT-3, 100 times more powerful, deals with entire meaning, and the information it has at its fingertips is every piece of information that's in the internet. Ladies and gentlemen, what is that going to do to literacy in this country? Forgive me, what's it going to do to brain development? I have a son-in-law in the medical field. He talks to me about this a ton. People in neurology, like Paul Nussbaum and others, say, do you have any idea of what this technology is going to do? And who's going to be the early adopters? The young or the old? The young. What should it do to our instructional programs? And so let me give you examples, just a few. I'm going to hold myself back, just a few quick examples of what this technology can do. And also recognize that they're creating higher and higher resolution of avatars. So we're going to go to a young lady here in a moment. And GPT-3 was asked, you'll see a simple question to this avatar, and it answered it. I want to see how good you are. Moore, come on over here with me, Moore. Moore is very, very bright. He really is. Is that not true, Dan? Yeah. Now, Dan, I could have called you up here, but I thought maybe more appropriate to put Mort in you. Okay. Moore, I want you to quickly tell me.
Can I call a friend?
No, you cannot call a friend. Quickly tell us, Moore, what is the color of a mirror?
Well, without any reflection on you, I'm not sure. Let's see. There is no color.
Okay. You can sit back down because you failed. Let's see. Ask very quickly. Watch what happens.
What color is a mirror?
A mirror is a very good example of a surface that reflects light. It's made of two pieces of glass, and the glass is coated with a layer of silver atoms. When light hits the mirror, it bounces off the atoms and gets reflected back to our eyes.
Sure. So what color is it?
The color of a mirror depends on the color of the object that's being reflected. If you look at a white piece of paper, the reflection will be white. If you look at a black piece of paper, the reflection will be black.
What's that mean? You can ask this thing, anything is going to get the answer. Let me give you another example, and we'll have some people guess here. What food does a rainbow taste like? Okay, everybody think of something. What food does a... Hey, Bart, what do you think, Bart?
For me, I'd have to say pasta.
Pasta. A good Italian boy over here said pasta. I don't know. What do you think, ma'am?
Skittles.
Skittles. I've had other people answer that. What do you think, Dave?
I'm going to follow his lead and go pizza.
Pizza, okay. Let's see what GPT-3 says instantly to the question.
What's the closest tasting food to a rainbow?
A rainbow is a spectrum of light that is visible when the sun shines on droplets of moisture in the atmosphere. So, if you want to taste a rainbow, you will need to find some water droplets in the atmosphere.
Is it correct? See, what do our kids need to know, do, be like? Let me take you deeper. Language translation. It can do instantaneous language translation. So let me show you three very dramatically different examples, okay? First one is converting from one language to another. The second one is taking a very difficult legal document and instantly rewriting it so a second grader can understand it. Okay, watch.
One of the common applications of GPT-3 is translation. So here we can give it an example of an English sentence that we want translated. Your order will arrive in 7 to 10 business days, and ask it to translate into French. We can also use translation to translate things that are written in legalese, this is an NDA, non-disclosure agreement, and translate that into something that a second grader would understand.
Instantaneous. By the way, you know how scared this has got the publishers? Think about it. Let me take you deeper. Here's another example.
So one of my favorite examples here is the user says, my apartment had mold and it made me sick. To which the GPT-3 generates, the plaintiff's dwelling was infested with toxic and allergenic mold spores. and plaintiff was rendered physically incapable of pursuing his or her usual and customary vocation, occupation, and or recreation. Now, this is pretty impressive as well. It almost seems to understand the concept of mold making you sick and equate that with, rendered physically incapable. So this is pretty exciting stuff. I mean, here's another one. My landlord didn't maintain the property. GPT takes that text and generates, the defendants have permitted the real property to fall into despair and have failed to comply with the state and local health and safety codes and regulations. I can't wait to see where this goes legally and how much it brings down the accessibility of legal services to the everyday person.
What are employees in the workplace going to expect future workers to use? The technology that's faster, more efficiently, less expensive, or our graduates? And yet, clearly there are going to be more jobs, but they do not look at all like our present jobs. Let me take you deeper. The first video I'll show you very quickly is one from Apple. I showed it first a year ago. It was futuristic. It is now on the market.
A normal-looking pair of glasses, perhaps like these, is the future of augmented reality. AR blends the real world with the virtual one. The glasses will bring information from your phone to your face, so you'll be able to see texts, emails, and more on both lenses without anyone else around you being able to see what's on your screen.
Do you realize that means that kids literally could be sitting in our classrooms playing video games with each other, and we would never know it? And if you think that one's tough, this is a contact lens. Literally with GPT-3, it's an app, just come out, and they have the contact lens on, and you activate it by looking to the left. That's why you see the little motor there. And it will instantaneously translate language. So here's a man in Japan, can't read Japanese, but wants therefore to read the signs, and it converts it instantly into English for him. What's that do to second language programs? It doesn't mean they're not important, but it may be more about cultural understanding than it is language translation. Or the ability to reason. See, GPT-3 doesn't just call information, it creates information. So here's a question, another app. You ask it a math problem, it answers it, and then it says, can you write that in a JavaScript? Think what this will do literally over the next 12 months to programmers nationwide.
GPT-3, what is 4,786 plus 5,326?
10,112.
Can you write a JavaScript function which takes any number and adds 265 to it?
Function n, return n plus 265.
It looks like you're using reasoning to answer these questions. Is that right? Or were you able to find the answers in your training data?
I'm using reasoning to answer these questions.
And so what are the tech companies looking at? Use this technology in education. What's it mean? Kids doing math? The app can instantly track whether the child's getting the math problem right or wrong, knows the child's history, what they have an interest in, bring up an example of that math application to an area that child has an interest in, and instantly, in effect, tutor it. A little different, Dan, than that classroom of 100 years ago. Here's the question. With or without us? I began early by saying I thank God every time I go internationally and return to America, because we are about a lot more than simply core academics. We need the kids in public education, but we got to bring public education into the 21st century. Just one final example here about GPT-3. it can engage in entire conversations on a topic. And so here is, they ask a question about, and this is a long one. It's almost 60 minutes long, this whole conversation. I just pulled 2 little clips out of it. It says, what is the status of critical thinking in America, and what's the problem with it? And so the first one is a very kind of university level response, and then the second one later on is one that I could hear some of us maybe making.
Why do you think so many people believe there's so little critical thinking?
I don't know. What do they say?
Well, there are different answers. Some people say that there is so little critical thinking because our universities are dominated by postmodernism and post-structuralism, and therefore it's impossible for philosophers to produce valid arguments in defense of traditional views about the world. Others argue that the present state of American K-12 education is terrible, and that's why there's so little critical thinking. Others argue that the problem lies with the lack of critical thinking ability in general. They say that people are lousy at critical thinking, and this is what explains the lack of critical thinking in our universities and in K-12 education.
Let's go deeper and see what this guy then thought later on in the conversation.
You are being separated from all that you hold dear by people who have misunderstood the world in the ways that they understand it, and then they have separated you from them. They say that people like them must be left alone to think for themselves, but they break the rules of reasoning and reasoning ethics in order to do this. They see your parents as weak if they learn what is considered correct according to their conventions, and therefore indoctrinate you with their own assumptions and traditions against what you believe is right for yourself.
I could give you other examples, but here's the reality. What assignments are you going to give kids that the technology is not going to be able to do instantaneous? What do we need to teach? How do we need to teach? How do we need to restructure our curriculums? Again, I could go on and on. The metaverse is going to have a profound impact. I'm not going to hit it. I will give you one other example about something called deep fake. If any of you know who Bill Whitaker is, CBS anchor, does 60 Minutes. He describes this deep fake, and then I want to play an example of it for you.
And the head, the eyebrows, the mouth, the way it moves.
It's all synthetic.
I could be lounging at the beach and say, folks, I'm not going to come in today, but you can use my avatar to do the work.
You could do that.
I'm going to play you an example. And it's of Bill Whitaker. It looks just like him. It's an app. It looks just like him. It sounds just like him. But he never said it. Now I want you to think, superintendents in the room. How could a student, a teacher, a community member who's mad at you use this technology? How are we going to monitor this technology? Watch it.
This is the result. The words you're hearing were never spoken by the real Bill into a microphone or to a camera. He merely typed the words into a computer and they come out of my mouth.
To say anything they want it to say. GPT-3 is only one of many deep learning models that are out there. But here's the reality. Our kids are different. The world we're attempting to prepare them for is fundamentally different. This advancing technology is going to cause some major disruptions to our education system, but it also can create incredible dramatic improvements. There's a couple sessions here that'll go deeper in and around GPT-3. Melbert Smith, Alistair Van Moore. Melbert was the creator of the Lexile and Quantile framework, a member of the commission. During a session, it's session 6 on Wednesday at 11:15, they're going to show you, his company was recently bought out by venture capitalists. with deep pockets who have made a decision to go deep after the whole area of GPT-3 and its impact on education. They're just going to share some examples. Ray McNulty then will do a session at 3 o'clock on Wednesday with Steve Brown. We'll talk more about what is the implication of GPT-3. But that's only one example of many. And so here's the reality. Year 2 of Learning 2025. We've got to continue the great work you've done already, but we need to come together to explore in depth the possibilities and lead in terms of AI, in terms of its potential impact on curriculum and instruction. Because of my own personal interest in this, because of Melbert's personal interest in this, Ray McNulty's deep commitment to it, and Robert Peters, who's our chief academic officer. In year 2, one of the options we're going to have is to really bring together some of the academic leaders of your schools, whoever that might be, in a tiny district to a big district, and put them in a series of focus groups. And I want to work with those focus groups. And there'd be multiple ones, depending on your interest, your need, your size of your district. And we want to talk through, because we don't have the answer. Nobody's got the answer. We collectively have to find the answer in terms of policies and practices. And then what that group works on, we'll bring back to be one of the central focuses of next year's summit. We want to get you engaged in that. There will be sessions later in the conference that Mort and I will run for both existing districts in Learning 2025 and new districts, and we'll talk about some of the services for year 2. We're going to continue all the first year services, but we're going to go much deeper, more boardroom to classroom in year 2. And then ultimately, Dan, the AASA, as you, Mort said, walk the halls of Congress, meet with the Secretary of Ed. Maybe we'll have some good examples so that practice can drive policy rather than having policy impinge upon best practices. So let me hit for just a few minutes. What's this all mean to what maybe we do need to teach in terms of the knowledge, skills, and behaviors? And McKinsey and Company has done extraordinary research, 2 major research projects in the last year. Some of you have seen the first part of this data. I'm going to update it. They went out to 18,000 companies. How many companies, ladies and gentlemen? 18,000, small, medium, large, every industrial sector, and said, identify for us what skills, knowledges, and attributes your workers need now and projected to 2025. And when they did that, they then worked with the U.S. Department of Labor, broke all the jobs into 5 quintiles. So on the left-hand side are the lowest 20% of the paying jobs in the country. On the right-hand side, the highest 20% of the jobs in terms of wage. Not surprising to anybody, lower wage jobs, a lot of physical manual skills. But that figure, that's 50%, is projected to drop to 22% of all paid working hours for that group by 2025. The advance in technology is going to change it. Basic cognitive skills, what is that? That's basically your state test. Higher cognitive skills. SEL. Why are higher cognitive skills and SEL so vitally important? This might be the most important single sentence of my keynote. If you can write an algorithm for a task, the job is gone. Because AI now has algorithms that write algorithms 24/7. And you can't write an algorithm for those skills. We've got to create within our students the skills that the technology can't do, or the higher technological skills. But when they got them together, including SEL, they began to say, you know what? They are too broad of terms. So they went back and did a deeper study, back to the same 18,000 companies, and broke it down into 56 specific skills. These focus groups I want to work with will use some of this research, and they're continuing to update it. And we'll look at these. And what they began to say is, let me go back. What they began to say is there are cognitive skills, interpersonal skills, self-leadership skills, digital skills. Well, what do our kids need to know? One of the reasons we partner with Battelle for Kids is they are the nation creator and leader of Portrait of a Graduate, which we are now saying, let's talk about a portrait of a learner and an educator. They're going to talk about that in a session this morning at 11:15, session 2. That's a good way to begin that discussion. But when you look at this, ladies and gentlemen, we have a serious instructional design challenge in front of us because we are basically organized for the top left-hand side, which is very important. But I profess to you, we know how to do this. We've been working at it forever. But that second set of skills, interpersonal skills, look at the list. See, technology can't do this. Or, how about the self-leadership skills? Now, let me go back and ask a question I asked a few minutes ago, but slightly different. How many of you have a son or a daughter who is a preteen through mid-20s? Everybody got hands way up. Okay, permit me to tell you what's going to happen to you. My kids are a couple decades older than yours. Your son or daughter is going to come home in the near future, and standing right next to them is going to be a young man or a young woman you're beginning to see an awful lot of. And at some point in your life, you're going to say, holy cats, this is going to become my son-in-law or daughter-in-law. And think very deeply, you're going to say, oh, wow, this could become the parent of my grandchild. At that moment in your life, I want you to look at the screen. What is going to be most important? I bet you're just going to say, oh, as long as they got good basic skills. What are you hoping when you get a new next-door neighbor? Great test score? How many in this room have ever had to fire somebody? Why was it? Look at the list. Are we really about the whole learner? Are we really about making every child all they're capable of being? Isn't it all of these things? But then, what about these digital communication technology skills? Because when you integrate basic cognitive skills and interpersonal skills, you have what the research is saying are the digital communication and technology skills. Look at the list. Now go back and think about the Bill Whitaker avatar. Christy, somebody in your community can instantly have, as long as they get a picture of you, and if they got video of you, they can create an avatar that people will swear is you, and they can type any statement as if you said it, and it'll come out of your mouth. What about digital ethics? By the way, can you see kids bullying each other around some of this stuff and doing some things? And ladies and gentlemen, this is not a course. This is a remixing of the batter. It's like basic. Who should teach basics, folks? Tell me, who should teach basics? Everybody. When? Every day. Same thing here. Our problem is our kids are more adept at this than we are. Let me give you an example from one of our PD experiences. When they went on a break, watch the one gentleman who forgot that if he wasn't going to put pants on, he should have turned his video off.
Can you hear us?
Tony!
Oh, no. Jen, call him. Oh my gosh. Takes a couple pictures of that. Oh. Oh boy.
What's up?
Tony, I can see you. You're
We can all see you.
And then what about the higher cognitive skills? Remember my comment about the prefrontal cortex and the weakening of the hippocampus. And if you think about the hippocampus kind of like the roots of a tree and the prefrontal cortex, the trunk of the tree, it's becoming weakened. Aren't they the very skills we're saying kids are increasingly having deficits with? What are the instructional practices you put in place to develop these skills? How do you do that? What are the social and well-being skills that come together because of interpersonal and self-leadership? These are what we call the future-focused skills. But ladies and gentlemen, don't try to do all of these. Remember, your staff is physically and emotionally exhausted. Pick some that work. That's why we want to work with, yes, the superintendents, but yes, the chief academic officers, whoever that might be in your district, whoever has that lead role for instruction. And let's get them in groups and let's begin to talk and think through deeply. But to recognize this is not about one new instructional practice. It's about a systematic process driven by successful practices, creating them to inform where we're trying to go, to assist implementation. But remember I said you almost have to have a picture of it? So I want to take you to a district we've had the privilege to work with recently. It's in Tennessee. It's Clayton Bragley. I want to take you to two young ladies. And the project, as they described the project they did in 9th grade. Now here's the key. It's not just a project we give kids in problem-based learning. It's a project that you build specifically based upon the 9th grade math standards and the 9th grade science standards. And you try to see where they come together and build an example of having the kids work it through. Now, what they did, they integrate math, science, and technology. They call it engineering. They fondly call their teacher a doctor. But watch the kids.
My name is Jaden Bogert, and I'm in 10th grade.
I'm Caroline Stina, and I am in 10th grade.
So in our engineering class last year, we got into the class and our teacher told us to pick a project that had some impact on someone's life, and we both knew we wanted to be partners, and we both liked volunteering, and we both wanted to work with the 3D printer. So our teacher, Dr. Lucas, came to us with this idea of us 3D printing prosthetic hands for someone. So yeah, this is Zachary's arm, and like Anaya, his arm cuts off at about like middle of the forearm. He picked red and blue and kind of like it.
Yeah, it's kind of like superhero colors.
Yes.
Watch it as they give Zachary his arm.
Here, why don't we do this? Look, it's the elephant in the room, man. Hats. How cool is that?
Self-leadership skills, interpersonal skills, application of academics, their math and science standards that they'll never forget. Ladies and gentlemen, how do you start it? This has got to be a boardroom to classroom experience. And it starts with creating a culture. To understand why we need to change, that's what I've attempted to do in this opening keynote. You'll see throughout the summit, what's the implications to instruction? We have an instructional design challenge in this country. But how are you going to assess it? We've begun work creating rubrics to evaluate all these various skills. The groups we'll work with during the year will share these with you. In year 2, hopefully you'll pick and choose some that make sense for you. But then you've got to think deep and long. How do I provide the support to my staff, my community? Because remember, we got teachers who have spent their life on a scripted curriculum. This is a fundamental change. And that's amongst one of many examples of services and supports we'll provide during year 2 to all the Learning 2025 districts. By the way, what you've got to do, if you think about that opening forum, equilibrium I showed, where are you? Are you on the left side, on your right side? How you go from one to the other? Ray McNulty and Robert Peters will do some sessions on these right after this session in Ballroom E, which is on that side. They'll go in more depth on it. Then session 56 this afternoon at 3 o'clock, they'll also go in, especially on the side of how do you stabilize the districts. Overall, the message is this. We need leadership strategies. They start there. But every good superintendent in this country knows if you're going to reform schools, it's top-down support for bottom-up reform. And that means we've got to get serious about the instructional strategies. How do we make those changes? How do we then redesign our instructional programs and ultimately redesign the workforce? The supports we'll provide for this, Mort and I and Valerie Truesdale will go over for existing demonstration districts at 4:15 today. For potential new districts, and we're about 60% existing districts, and about 40% potential new districts in the audience. For that 40% on Thursday morning, we'll go through the various services. With that, ladies and gentlemen, let's go out, use this as a time, and remember, come on in here at lunch, if you would like, get the food off the food trucks, out of the restaurants, begin some planning. Let's celebrate over the next 2 days or 3 days all we've accomplished, but let's keep our eye on the future. These are my 14 grandchildren. They're the ones I will stay focused on. And so my final word of advice, and as we go to leave, make sure that you go to the app and do evaluations of every session you attend, because that's going to tell us what you need to see next year. But as you do that, let's focus on our kids. Let's love our kids and embrace their future more than we embrace the schools of our youth. Thank you. Have a great summer.